Tell me about these 50 research projects that you found out about are happening at Anthropic.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anthropic has been running a fellowship program for going on a year at this point, and through this program, they bring on younger researchers to collaborate with their more senior researchers at the company. These researchers tend to be, say, college age or PhD students who are interested in collaborating at Anthropic. And through the program, Anthropic's mentors, their senior researchers, propose research projects that these people can work on. So they proposed 49. Probably of those, about only half ended up getting pursued because of the interests of the people in the particular cohort that they have running right now. But maybe the best way to give you a window into these projects is to tell you about sort of the 6 categories that they fall into, if that sounds good. Sort of
Tell me.
the buckets. So the first is security, like you mentioned, ensuring that, say agents that are working on the web don't get exposed to a hack or a prompt that convinces them to expose a user's personal information. A second category is AI control, which is a category of research that refers to figuring out how we can get useful work out of an AI model when we're not sure that the AI model has the same goals as us. So, for example, you might want to use a weaker but more trusted model to supervise the actions that it tries to take and flag anything that looks suspicious. There's another bucket of projects called Scalable Oversight, which is a research agenda that focuses similarly on using weaker AI models to supervise and train stronger AI models. There's a category called Model Internals, which is, in the more jargon, we would call that like mechanistic interpretability. It's a real mainstay of Anthropic's research. It involves understanding what's going on under the hood, like inside the models, what's responsible for the outputs that we see, because these models they're sort of a black box, is how we would talk about it. And then the last two are one is model organisms, which is Anthropic's term for when we use existing models as sort of, imagine like doing a science experiment on a mouse and hoping that the results generalize to a human someday. It's when we inspect modern day models for signs of the kind of risks and scenarios that could arise in future, more powerful models. So a number of Anthropic's projects are focused on that. And then the last category is projects that focused on understanding Chinese models, evaluating them, figuring out what their capabilities are, also improving Anthropic's ability to host and run those models itself. So that's the breakdown.
So this is kind of fascinating because this is a window into basically how Anthropic is prioritizing its research efforts, specifically to do with sort of the risk and safety functions of its AI. I want to ask you about these rogue agents that you wrote about, because I think, you and I have talked about OpenClaw and sort of some of the security risks that come with letting an agent loose and potentially giving it access to not just your whole computer, but your accounts too, and saying do what you want. Your reporting was interesting because it actually seemed to suggest that Anthropic is leaning into that risk and trying to figure out how to protect against it. How is it doing that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it's a topic that's certainly on their minds. I don't know if you saw yesterday, Summer Yu, who's a researcher at Meta, said that her OpenClaw agent went and started deleting all of her emails, even though she didn't want it to. And that was an example where the agent was clearly doing something that was not aligned with her desires, but it wasn't even hacked in that case. It was just that it wasn't following instructions properly. So there's a lot of scenarios to be worried about here. Some of them are just the agent misunderstanding what it's supposed to do and sort of making mistakes by accident. Some of them involve it following instructions, but those instructions being malicious. Someone tries to get their agent to do something it's not supposed to, say, to conduct a cyber attack. And then there's this sort of other genre that involves hacking, like someone
Right.
putting a prompt out on the web to try to steal your information, steal your crypto wallets, what have you.
So how is Anthropic protecting against that, or trying to protect against it then?
Yeah, I think there's a range of approaches. Some of it involves studying what models are capable of right now. For example, we have a sense that Claude could be good at cyber attacks, but No one has tried that hard to get Claude to compete in cybersecurity challenges. People have tinkered with it, but it has a ways to go. So, one sort of thrust of the research is just figuring out what is Claude even capable of? What are these models capable of? How dangerous could they be? And then also creating benchmarks or standardized tests to measure that in a more rigorous way, so we can notice when there's an improvement in those capabilities. And then, of course, there's also interest in mitigating those risks and figuring out how we can train the models to behave better. So, for example, one of the projects that Anthropic's researchers proposed for their fellows is when a sort of cybersecurity incident or one of these hacking incidents appears in the wild, can we take that and can we automatically reproduce it in a way that we could train Claude to not fall for the same trap again in the future? Right now, that's a pretty manual process. If one of these things gets spotted in the wild, say an agent gets hacked when it's interacting with a banking website, an Anthropic employee has to sit down and recreate the banking website with the same attack and ensure that it works. And it's a little tedious. The project proposes, well, what if we could just do that automatically?
Now, you had a conversation with one of Anthropic's safety leaders. What were the questions that you went into that interview with, and what ultimately did you learn from that conversation?
Yeah, I think one question on the back of my mind is how significant is the research that these fellows are pursuing? I mean, we're talking about researchers that sometimes don't have a lot of experience. They're maybe only working for 4 to 6 months. Anthropic is probably picking projects for them that they can accomplish in that short of a time, maybe without a lot of access to their models or without a ton of compute. So I was wondering, how significant can the research really be that's come out of the program? And I was informed that of the research that one of their key safety teams has put out over the past several months, the fellows account for more than half of that output. So I think I was surprised that the fellowship program, I think, is becoming a significant portion of Anthropic's work and a big uplift to this kind of safety and security research that they're working on. And there have been a couple pretty high profile examples of research coming out of the program. And now that we have a sense of what the mentors are proposing for the next batch of fellows, I think we have some things to keep an eye out for.
Great. Well, Rocket, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Rocket True, our AI and robotics reporter here at The Information.